Jane and I moved into the Four Seasons neighborhood about 3 years ago. It's a wonderful community. We love living here. We have some excellent neighbors. But I serve as executive director of the NorthStar Church Network. We have 180 churches, and that takes a good deal of my time reaching out to these churches on a regular basis. And so we really haven't had much time to get to know our neighbors and connect with them and develop relationships with them. I believe that that has been a real mistake on our part. You see, Jesus says that the two greatest commandments are to love God with all of your heart and to love your neighbor as yourself. Maybe, just maybe, Jesus is talking about our real neighbors. Maybe Jesus wants us to reach out and love our next door neighbors.
So the interest in neighboring, I think, comes from a couple of different places. I grew up in a small town. When I moved here to Northern Virginia, I sort of wanted to create that sense of community that you often find in small towns.
And I got interested in neighboring through my wife, as she said, when we got married. I originally was not that much of an extrovert, but as two shall become one, as the Bible says, I've enjoyed and come to love having people over to our house and getting to know new people, including our neighbors.
So some of the things we've done to try to be good neighbors is to try to have a housewarming party very soon after moving into the neighborhood. We don't try to focus on the house looking perfect or it being all ready, but just to make that initial impression to say, hey, you're the first party that we're gonna have is with our neighbors. So one of the challenges a lot of people have with neighboring is remembering their neighbors' names. I'm also very bad with names, so I like to write lists. I'm a list maker, and so in order to remember some of my neighbors' names, I've also tried to make lists of the neighbors and try to associate their names with something visual. But also, even after I've learned their names, not being afraid to ask them what their name is again. I've done that for the number of years that I've lived here, and I've never once had anyone say to me that, or act offended or not tell me their name, even after I've met them once, twice, 10 times.
A suggestion that I would have with regards to how I would be more neighborly, to start off with, is just to not have blinders on when you're coming and going. Just be aware of who is around you. And also then to not be intimidated in just starting a conversation of, hi, I'm Aaron Kahn. Nice to meet you. How long have you lived here? And I think people are very willing to share their story once you ask them.
I think too, it's if we are to follow what the Bible says about loving your neighbor as yourself and to take that literally, and our neighbor being the people right around us and not just this obscure term of neighbors being everyone. I feel like prayer is very important in becoming a better neighbor and trying to meet people where they are and to try to love them where they are, and prayer is a big part of that.
There's a new movement within the church in our country that just began a few years ago. It's called the art of neighboring. And the simple idea of this movement is that the main role that Christians have in living out their ministry within their church really is to reach out and love their neighbors and care for their neighbors. Can you imagine if there were thousands of NorthStar members throughout Northern Virginia who were reaching out to their neighbors and loving their neighbors and caring for their neighbors? What an impact we could have on Northern Virginia if that took place. So again, just two basic commitments that we're asking you to make. One is to learn the names of your neighbors and call your neighbors by their name. And then secondly, pray for your neighbors and pray that God will give you opportunities to develop a relationship with them. We can impact Northern Virginia through the art of neighboring in 2018 and beyond.